You're listening to Were You Still Talking? Hey, welcome back. It's Joel Albrecht again. It is Were You Still Talking? Which you just heard on the introduction. Today in my studio, I have Eric Slivoskey. I knew I was going to forget to ask him how to pronounce that. And Eric he's from a small town in North Dakota. He is a writer. He's a personal trainer. He's a development coach. And recently, a stand-up comic. I'm going to ask him about all those things. He's slightly obsessed with contact sports, world travel, avocados, big dogs, coffee. He also has cats, I believe. I've got to ask him about those from the get-go because that's what my wife wants to know about. Eric has traveled to all 50 U.S. states and more than 50 countries. He's bumped into a lot of things along the way. Once walked the Camino Trail across a slice of France and most of Spain, all Forrest Gump-like. He did 800-plus kilometer pilgrimage in 27 days, covering more than 1.2 million steps in a $25 pair of shoes. I find that absolutely amazing. I always wondered how many steps you would cover in 27 days. I'm always looking at my steps. I don't think I've gotten close to 1.2 million in 27 years. Oh, no, I haven't had it that long. So, Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Even better now here to be with you, and just really excited about this. Been looking forward to this for a while, and great to be on the show.
Awesome. That's nice to hear. I've been looking forward to talking to you. You have, there's way too much on your website that we could even get into. I was reading the little like 10-page introduction. I did pretty well on your test, but not quite. And how do you pronounce your name?
It's Slivoskey.
Slivoskey. I was pretty close. Yeah. EricSlivoskey.com. It's a fun website, fun place to go. It's where its personal coaching is starting. And this is one of the few people, I got to tell you, you're one of the few people where you're starting a personal coaching business and you are a coach. I mean, you started out actually being a coach, which is, I think, pretty rare. And you had, have you ever heard of the Oregon Ducks? You ever heard of that?
I've heard of them. It's that team out west.
It's that team out west.
In fact, where I live here, if we ever have a football season, there's a pretty good team here in North Dakota. They call them the Bison, and so they're supposed to open up out at the Ducks. From what I understand.
That's right, and that would be a really exciting game. And always loved that game. They play them almost every year.
Happens because I think a lot of people are curious just to see, because North Dakota State's kind of been this powerhouse at the Division I AA level, but then Oregon's a whole different level, of football. So it would be very fascinating to watch that game.
And Oregon's a whole different, like so often happens, it's a whole different team this year because unfortunately we lost our champions to the NFL. So we lost at least 5 really amazing players. That's what's fun about college. You get to see every 4 years. You never know what you're going to get
from year to year.
You never.
Because there's always those young guys that step up. That people have those 18, 19-year-old kids that like, who's this? Like, oh my goodness, this guy's good. And then you have this whole new sort of your team for 3 or 4 years, and the new guys finally get their opportunity to play. So it's always fun.
It is. It's a really fun thing to watch. And you coached one of the winningest teams in college football?
I coached. I would say we were not one of the winningest. I would say we were a little further down the line there as the rankings go. In fact, we were so far down the rankings that they wrote a book about us. They write a lot of books about coming in first, and so. I guess they have to write a book or two about who's the worst. And so we were featured in this book after ESPN came out and watched us a couple of times and sent some reporters out and said, there's a story out there on the plains. There's this little football program that's, somehow surviving. But it was quite an interesting time in my life. And it was, we didn't win a whole lot of games. I'll just say it that way.
You didn't win a whole lot of games, but I understand you still kept up a winning attitude. You still had fun playing the game? that right?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, it would. I could fill a podcast. I think just going through the stories of the young men that I coached and the heart, and the grit and the determination. Football is it's a difficult sport to play when you're losing badly, because you're oftentimes getting beat up physically very badly too. And so these guys that I coached, many of them played both ways. I mean, our numbers were so low. We were kind of one of those unusual programs in the country that had some guys playing Ironman football. So they're playing on both sides of the ball, which it's difficult to do at the high school level. At the college level, it's a whole other story. It's like playing 7, 8 quarters a game. And but yeah, I have immense respect for the young men that came out, because small college football, you're not getting a scholarship. You're not really getting a chance to go to the NFL or to the next level for the most part. It's just more, there's a purity to it. It's just more playing for the love of the game. And yeah, when you're suffering some pretty devastating losses, it's tough sometimes to find a motivation to keep going. But yeah, I'll always be proud of that team that they hung in there, and a lot of life lessons, to take from that.
Yeah, it really blows my mind when people can play both sides of the ball like that. It's, I mean, it's tough enough to play one side of the ball, and especially, I mean, things were different in those days a little bit, but
Yeah.
the difference in size between high school and college is pretty mind-boggling, and it jumps again when you get in the NFL. But even with watching the Ducks when they go up against those Eastern teams, suddenly they look little. The size has never been a big thing for the Ducks, and when they go up against a team where the size is everything, it's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
they're gonna get killed, and occasionally they do. And yeah, I always really feel for teams that are losing, especially if they're losing by a lot. And we had an old coach who would not let off the gas no matter what, and I always felt bad for the other team. And then, we've had some losses like that, so I know what I know what it feels
Yeah.
like. But
I
yeah,
tell you, there are a lot of times I didn't know who I felt worse for, myself and my players. I mean, because we suffered some doozies. I mean, we lost some games by 70, 80 points, and I would look across the field sometimes, and I would watch these coaches that we're competing against, and they're in anguish because they're trying to decide, how do you keep playing players deep into your roster that want to play. They want to come out and do well, whether they're third string, fourth string. So they're coming out to compete, and they're still scoring touchdowns, and they're trying to decide, do we even pass the ball, or when is it appropriate to stop passing the ball? And then I'm on my side thinking, do we just run the ball and kind of get this debacle over with, or do we throw it a little bit? Because if we throw it a little bit and they're incomplete, we're punting the ball right back to them, and they're going down the field and scoring again. So you end up having to kind of fight yourself and play these games within the game, and it really makes it tough for both coaches. A lot of times people don't realize that the winning coach sometimes is in just as much of an awkward place as the losing coach.
oh yeah, you definitely don't think about that when you're yelling at the TV and telling the coach what play he should be doing. It's you're never,
Yes.
never quite thinking about what the coach is actually going through. He's just supposed to be doing what you think is right. I mean,
That's right.
what's that guy doing? That
Yeah.
can't be right. And that's always one thing that always goes through my mind, especially in a devastating loss or even a ridiculous win, is when do you feel like just throwing in some insane play? I mean, when you're down by 50 points or more, is it tempting just to go, okay, let's start throwing in stuff they don't expect, or is that just throwing caution to the wind too much?
We definitely went deep into the well when we were losing. We were trying lots of trick plays.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we had one little gimmick, and it was listed in the book, and it was like on a kickoff. We were literally trying to hide the ball. Sort of the old bait and switch kind of. There's used to be a play. I think it's outlawed now. It's called the fumble rooski, and Nebraska used to run that play. And it's kind of like a deception type play where you hide the ball, and so So we did our own little version of that one time, and it backfired. I think we ended up dropping the ball, got tackled, ended up starting to drive at like our own 5 yard line. So we just kind of looked at each other as coaches and said, bad idea. We were even having trouble pulling off these trick plays.
Maybe not.
It was
Maybe
better
not.
stick to the conventional stuff. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, there is a temptation because you want to just pull out all the stops, be as creative as you can.
Right. Yeah, I would. It seems like that to me. Totally. So you have had quite a journey since being a coach. You've gone to all 50 states, which I have a dream of doing. I've gone to maybe 20, but I've always thought it would really be fun to visit all the states. You've gone to 50 countries, walked across a country in you walked 1.2 million steps. How many miles is that? 27 days? How many miles?
It was a little over 500 miles. So
Okay.
it was the Camino de Santiago. So it's like a pilgrimage in Europe, and starts in France, and then walked across a little slice of France and most of Spain, and it was a little over 500 miles.
Wow. And in and did you think I'm going to be tough and wear a $25 pair of shoes, or were you not really thinking I would need a better pair of shoes, or or you just never?
They were comfortable, and
Okay.
everybody was telling me you need to buy these, you need to get this hybrid shoe. It's a hiking boot that kind of feels like a tennis shoe, and
Mhm.
I was going back and forth, and I was, what shoe should I get? So at the end of the day, it was like 2 days before I was ready to get on the plane, and I'm like, well, even if I buy a good pair of shoes now, just wearing them it's going to take time and probably going to go through the whole blistering thing. So I'm going to go with the comfortable shoe that I already have worn in and see what happens. Now, 27 days later, and almost 1.2, 1.3 million steps. I had a Fitbit, so I would I would mark my progress every day. But the shoes held up. My feet. I have to say they took a beating though. I had some sore feet after that experience. I'm not sure. I don't think I would do that again. I think I would invest in the better pair of shoes, wear them in for 2 or 3 weeks, and then try that route. But yeah, somehow made it through that.
So if anyone is listening to the podcast and thinking of doing the pilgrimage, get a good pair of shoes.
Yes, yes. Best advice, and make sure you understand how to treat blisters. That'd be the second thing, because they're going to happen.
Oh yeah. Well, I imagine no matter how good your shoes are, you're going to get blisters walking that much.
Oh yeah, and there's all kind of tricks, different things I learned, sort of how to, putting Vaseline on your feet, start changing your socks, and all different sorts of little tricks you learn. But yeah, they're pretty much inevitable. You're putting your feet through that much abuse.
Oh yeah, that's got to be insane. Absolutely insane. And you are in, what are things in North Dakota like these days? You're on a farm, right?
I'm surrounded by farms. I don't have a farm where I live.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
kind of like that little proverbial little house on the prairie kind of settings, if you can imagine that. But if you go out in my backyard, it's just all cornfields, and I'm in the kind of place where it's like an hour to the nearest McDonald's, shopping mall, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're about an hour from Aberdeen, South Dakota, and I live in North Dakota. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of think social distancing, like pretty much 365 days a year before you needed a social distance. That's kind of where I live.
I would say it wasn't a big change for you.
It wasn't a big change. I was just like, hey, what's the big deal? But yeah, we're out here on the plains. Yes, it's flatter than a pancake where I live, and I've lived in some pretty mountainous regions, so it's been a little bit of an adjustment being in this flat country. But it's where I live, it's like a modern day Mayberry, really. You have one of everything, kind of a little market, little medical clinic, little hardware store, kind of have basics, about 1,400 people. And but it's just one of those salt of the earth, type places. People are friendly, and kind of place people don't really lock their doors, and it's just easy going and kind of easy living. Very, very easy living. So we like it out here.
Yeah, that sounds nice. It's always refreshing to know that places like that still exist, that there are I had relatives that had a wheat farm in Washington for, well, my whole life. The eldest finally just retired from it. But yeah, different world. A little place called Connell, Washington, same idea. Just there's a few rolling hills and wheat forever. So in the winter, it's just empty. It's just fields forever and ever, like as far as you can see.
That sounds exactly like it here. It was an adjustment for me. I mean, even coming here, the winters I'm not going to lie, they're brutal. I mean, they're pretty brutal.
Right.
Yeah, the wind there's nothing to stop it. I mean, there's not a lot of trees. So when the wind comes across the prairie, it hits you, and it's intense. And winter is a whole different experience out here. But you just kind of learn to adjust. Go somewhere in the winter, a lot of people plug their cars in, and then if you're in the little market, you leave your car running. You don't really turn your car off when you go shopping. You kind of leave your car running. That was a big adjustment for me coming from where I was living in the East Coast, because if you leave your car running, you come out, your car probably won't be there any longer. So here you leave your car running, go and do your shopping, you come back out, it's still there. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, even here, this is a kind of a fairly small town. Well, it's almost 200,000 now, but you leave your car running, it'll be gone. We have, I think it's because we're on the I-5 corridor. There's a lot of theft here, a lot of crime. So it would be nice to be able to do that. But it's funny because I noticed last time I went to the area where my cousins grew up and where they had their farm, I noticed everyone now locks their car, and it's kind of sad. It's like now they lock their doors, they lock their car. Things have changed.
Things are changing, that's for sure.
Yeah. And they're getting a lot of flow from Seattle, because Seattle got so overgrown. So even way out in eastern Washington, they're kind of getting overflow from that. So it's sad, but it's good to know there's still places.
There's a certain simplicity and a certain kind of ease of living that I think, you're right. We're kind of losing that to some degree, and things are changing a lot.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Ease of living. I remember that. Things are different now. It's probably not affecting you as much as a lot of us. I wouldn't think. Is life pretty much still normal since?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, we haven't had a whole lot of. We just finally got our first case a couple weeks ago, like first one in the whole county, and
wow.
So it's things haven't changed tremendously for us here. So it's still, people still talk about it though, and they're still aware. Down the road in South Dakota, they have had a few more issues with like one of the meat packing plants about an hour away, and they had some more outbreaks down there. So
that's just such a strange thing. Yeah, I've heard about that all over the country, that there's outbreaks at meat packing plants, and I'm wondering what the heck they're doing at these meat packing plants. I guess it's just everyone is so close together, and they're sweating and they're breathing hard. I mean, that's a hard job. I know.
It is. Yeah. I can't imagine being in all that gear,
Right.
I mean, that's got to be a tough environment pre-COVID. But then when you're putting on all this extra stuff to keep yourself, to provide that layer of protection, gosh, that's got to be rough.
Yeah, that's got to be really hard. I definitely feel for anyone working right now in those kind of capacities. I mean, the grocery store people have to, work behind, probably not where you are, but people are working behind plexiglass and wearing masks when they're not behind the plexiglass, and having to think about that so much all the time. It's really nuts. We're in Oregon, right between Washington and California. California's been bounced around between 1 and 3 for the last couple of days, but last week or so, highest cases. And Oregon has been really lucky. We are just now seeing spikes, but our spikes are like, going from seeing 10 a day to now we're seeing about 277 a day. And you think, oh my God, that's, wow, 270. But then you look at, well, there's 4.4 million people. So that's not crazy. Yeah, it's all relative. That's not insane. And then you see that, well, the hospitalizations increased by 2. Okay, I think we have the capacity for 2. We're going to be okay right now, but it's seeing the numbers go up it's nerve-wracking.
It
It's
is. It
definitely
really is. And
nerve-wracking.
then, because you just have these pockets right now, it seems, places like, I think, like Arizona has been hit pretty hard with some increases. I know my daughter's in LA right now staying with some friends, and she said they're closing some, I think it's bars and restaurants in some certain counties in LA. And I know got some friends in Florida said they've
Hmm.
had some pretty big increases there. So it's, just certain pockets, it seems, in the country is really, really experiencing some big surges.
Yeah. And we used to live in LA, so we're kind of happy we're not there now. Even though our life would not be that different, because where we lived, we could still go out and walk. We were in an area that was kind of isolated, so it would probably be okay. But just that many more people, it's that
Yeah.
many, it's a little more nerve wracking. Oh, crazy. So now that I'm thinking about living with my wife, she's going to want to know about the dogs and cats. You have, I think I saw on your Facebook page, you have what, 4 massive dogs and a couple of cats that keep them in line?
I have. Well, yeah, the 2 cats are the bosses, basically. I have two large dogs. We have 100 and he's probably pretty close to 150-pound Saint Bernard, Zeus, and then we've got a 130-pound Newfoundland, and she's kind of his partner in crime. 2 just gentle giant dogs that it's kind of like being out here in this open country, and they're real good with our kids and all that. So and then we have 2 cats that get along with them for the most part, and then my youngest daughter has a rabbit too. So we have like a little North Dakota zoo in our household. Five animals, 5 people, 5 animals, and it keeps life interesting. Our dogs they kind of rearrange furniture when they bump into things. I mean, they're that big, and but we try to get them outside a lot and get exercise. And but I don't know. I've always loved dogs, and I've always been kind of a big dog person, so we definitely enjoy them.
I love dogs and I love big dogs. I never had a dog that big. I never thought I could buy it enough food. But I've had, a medium-sized dog, which was really awesome. And I just always loved the Saint Bernards. They're such an
Yeah,
awesome breed. They're great dogs. They're
yeah.
amazing.
Zeus is he's just so cool. He's our first Saint Bernard. My wife always wanted a Saint Bernard, so it was an anniversary present. I surprised her, put him on her. She was coming out of our gymnastics practice one night with my youngest daughter, and I had driven down to Kentucky to get this dog off of a farm. I was living in West Virginia at the time, about 5 years ago, and so I surprised her, and so she absolutely loves this dog. But he's just a big gentle guy, big gentle giant, and and then our Newfie, she's pretty much the same. So she's the water beast, though. The Newfoundlands, they love water. She'll lay down in a mud puddle if you let her.
Oh,
Try to
yeah,
swim in it.
sure. There's a lot of dogs like that. That's a big dog it's even a bigger dog when it gets wet, right? It's
Oh yeah, that's for sure. It doesn't smell very well sometimes.
exactly. Suddenly that dog's a lot bigger. Oh, so let's see. You recently, not that long ago, quit your regular career and you're starting a new job.
It's true. I took the plunge. I turned 49 in December, and for a while I've been bouncing the idea around of going back into like a freelance life.
Hmm.
And just the circumstances with some cutbacks where I was working at a small college here, and I transitioned out of the sports coaching, but I was still teaching, doing administrative work, and I really started giving more serious thought to doing some more writing. And also, I started this coaching academy course over in London. My wife's English, and so we'd spend a lot of time in England, kind of going back and forth. My 2 oldest kids are going to go. The oldest daughter goes to school already in England. My son's getting ready to go over for his freshman year here in the fall. So I was taking this coaching academy course, and I really kind of plugged into something that I thought, like personal development coaching. Like, wow, this is I can use a lot of my life experiences, the sports coaching, the teaching, the mental health background that I have with counseling. Like it kind of is like the perfect storm uh, of, I guess you could say, people skills and things that I'm interested in. So I started taking this course, and I was getting closer to graduation, and I really realized like this is what I want to do. This is like I want to do this. This lights me up. Like I want to do this, and I want to be at home. My wife works out of the house, and I'm like, I want to write, I want to speak, I want to do a podcast. And I started just kind of all of a sudden, really thinking about, and I don't know, maybe it's turning 49 too, kind of did it to me. I was thinking, do I want to stay in this job that's starting to become a little bit more like a soul sucking type job? That
Mm-hmm.
I'm staying in it for the health insurance. I'm staying, all these reasons. And my two oldest are leaving the nest, and I'm kind of like starting to think a little bit more about what do I want to do now. And so it was a big pivot for me. Unfortunately, my wife was very supportive. She said, "You do it, just jump, take the leap, then it'll catch you." And so in December, I handed in my resignation, and I 2 weeks later, I had a stand-up comedy gig that I was doing back on the East Coast. It was a show that I did with a friend of mine, kind of a storytelling, music, and a stand-up show. And that was kind of like my first creative project that I ventured out onto on my own. And now it's been developing my coaching business, finishing up my course, getting back into some freelance writing projects and things like that. So it's been an exciting, nerve-wracking, and of course I'm doing it all during COVID, right? I picked a great time to just kind of launch right in the middle of the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. Which is, there's a lot of stories like that out there that people are start something and then boom, the world shut down.
Yeah,
but unfortunately and fortunately for you, it's for what you're doing, it's maybe a really good time because
you're right.
There's a lot of people that need that kind of help right now. Any kind of help, but definitely, I can see that you're about encouragement and striving to be better and all those different things. And again, I just, I see to me, it's like everyone wants to be a personal coach. Yep. I've had people tell me, yeah, you should be a life coach. I'm like, what? I barely got out of school. So it's really refreshing to see someone who's been to 3 different colleges, who's coached for years of his life. You've actually done a coach. And then you went back to school for it was 2 years, right? You went back to school for 2 years to learn about coaching, which also gave you another 2 years to look at it and see, is this for me? Why you kept working a job. I think it's refreshing to see that. It feels like you would have a lot to give people, a lot of life experience, and now a lot of training to give back to the world. I appreciate that.
Thank you for that. It's been very empowering for me just to kind of go through the process. And when I worked in mental health is so much of a question of kind of looking at your past and looking at the why am I this way or why do I feel this way. And one of the things I really enjoy about coaching is just it's really looking at like your strengths and and some of the limitations that we put on ourselves, like the stories that we tell ourselves or the stories that society tells us, the stories that our parents tell us. And a lot of times those things they're self-limiting, but coaching is also very, very forward focused, so it's kind of drawing in, what do I want out of life? What do I want my life to look like? And then getting clarity around that and getting that into alignment with your values and beliefs. And it's that forward focus that really, I think a lot of times gets people to kind of engage their creativity, their imagination and things that a lot of times you haven't used since you were a kid. You think about how the average kid kind of gets through the world, and it's sort of using creativity and thinking up things to do and using their imagination. And I think when we become adults, a lot of times we're like, okay, fun's over, it's done. That's part of my childhood. But coaching, I just really kind of help people re-engage with that. And that's been, I'll tell you, that's magic. It's been really, really exciting. I was talking to a guy earlier today that, just in the last 6 weeks, he just left his position, was working in a pool company, and he wanted to be a personal trainer. And he got out of the pool business just within the last month and a half, started his own personal training company. He's got 8 clients already. He was scared to do this 2 months ago. I talked to him today. He's through the roof. He's like, I cannot believe that I'm doing this. And people are, I can't even believe it. So it's so exciting to hear stories like that. And he's like, I think he's mid-40s. And he was, like me, he was kind of afraid to take that plunge. The fear, the self-doubts, the stories we tell ourselves, the imposter syndrome, those kinds of things sometimes we can get in our own way. And coaching really helps people unlock themselves. And so, yeah, it's been a good fit for me.
That's awesome, and I can relate to all those things. As a, I'm an actor. I was a musician. Maybe I still am. Now I'm a podcaster. So all that stuff hits me every day. I'm always like, should I even put this podcast up? Who am I? Who am I to be talking to the world?
I say that far too often.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. You have to remember that's just that's like not real. It's just your past talking, right? It's just
right. It's your ego. It's your past. It's that version of ourselves. The ego. It's a concept. It's a construct. It's a version of ourselves, but it's not. It's who we think we are, but it's not truly who we are. And sometimes it does cause us to get in our own way. But yeah, you're right. You got to put it out into the world, just like you're doing. You got to do it.
Yeah, and it's more difficult than I ever imagined. There's a lot of people. I see a lot of personal development coaches or just development people, a lot of trainers who are trying to train everyone to be the best they can be. And they put out videos at least once a week, sometimes almost every day, and it just blows my mind because it really takes a lot of energy. People don't realize just to sit here and talk. I much prefer it with people. Like that's why a podcast for me is so much better. At least I'm talking to somebody. It's very difficult just to stare into a screen and talk, and so many people are doing that now that have a lot to say and are very encouraging and are. I think it takes more energy than people realize for them to do that to do that and put that energy out there. And anyone who's doing that, I applaud. I think it's really awesome, totally awesome. And you were talking about, you've got a great website created. You were talking about the possibility of starting a podcast, and we were getting into a little of that before the show. So, what do you? Is there any question I might be able to answer about starting a podcast or anything I can help? I mean, I'm not an expert, but I'm getting there.
Yeah. So I think I'm in that, that stage where I've got the general idea, the general concept, and just to kind of briefly go through that, it's going to be more of a sort of, I guess you could say informational, instructional. I would also say informational, instructional, and really it's going to be offered for people who are looking to, kind of reinvent themselves. People that are maybe in overwhelm, stress, anxiety, they're stuck, and they're just kind of wanting to possibly even monetize a hobby or something that they enjoy. And they want to kind of take that leap and build the life that they've always wanted to live. And so my idea is kind of bring on just a variety of different guests. People that maybe other coaches, actors, people like yourself. I mean, people that have a great story that can really kind of into this positivity and putting positive vibes into the world, and have a blueprint, or a compass. Here's how I did. Here's how I did it, and here's how I fell down along the way, and here's what I learned, and kind of talking about the messiness and the humanity of it all. So that that's my concept. But I think for like a lot of other people, I think it's it's just knowing where to start with the tech. And then it's like, you hear a lot of people, they're using these different services, and some people say this one's better, other people say this one's better. And one thing I do know is that I want to try to get on as many platforms as possible. I know you and I were talking a little bit about that because there's a lot of different vehicles out there that are releasing podcasts, it seems like, into the ecosystem. We know the obvious, the big ones. But I guess that's one of my big questions is just, being able to get my message out to as many platforms as possible, or as many of the hosting, I'm not even sure what you call them. I guess they'd be the platforms, but and how does one go about that? Kind of getting yourself out there so that you're reaching as many audience members as possible.
So that's it's right. It's hosting services, and like SoundCloud is a hosting services. They will let you put their podcast up for free.
Yes.
There are several other hosting services with a free option. If you read what that free option is, it's not a lot. It especially for me, because I talk a lot, and I tend to gravitate towards people that are gonna have a longer conversation, especially when this is the second best thing now that we can do Zoom. It's at least I can see the person and talk to them. And if I can, when people are sitting in the room, I've had 3-hour conversations because we're just sitting at a table and talking. And you've done more homework than me right off the bat. You're thinking about what it's going to be about. That's a really good idea. I should have thought of that. So I was about 5 in before I went, okay, now what is this about? And I came up with some ideas. The hosting services, I am on Libsyn, Liberated Syndication. You guys can send me a check anytime. So I have great things to say about them and complaints about them. The good thing about a hosting platform, and there's at least 5, I would go with what you're talking about doing. If I was going to give you advice, I would say go with a bigger one. Look at the big 3. And you can look them up pretty easy. If you look up Libsyn, the other 4 will come up. Obviously, the advantage is they put that podcast out to really as many places as you can think of. And there is some setup in the beginning. The problem with Libsyn that I found is, although they say it's really simple, you have to have a little bit of tech savvy. Or ask a lot of questions. The great thing about that is they will answer the questions. The Rob Walsh, who's the head of podcast relations, I think it is. Anyway, he's someone who's been podcasting since 2006, and he has a podcast he's a guest on a podcast about podcasting, The Feed. So listen to The Feed, by the way. It's for anybody. It's free. Listen to The Feed, look through the episodes and look at the ones about starting a podcast. And on there, he said, I'll come on your podcast if you ask. So I asked. So I was able to have him on and ask him, personally on the podcast some questions. You can listen to that here too, Rob Walsh. And it was amazing just how open he is and how excited he is about podcasting after doing it for, what was 2006? So that was 14 years ago.
Wow.
He started before Joe Rogan even. He at one time helped Joe Rogan and helped Tim Ferriss with their podcasts. He said he fired himself because they knew, they knew plenty, and they didn't really need. He was like, you don't need me. Do what you're doing. But people like that come to him for advice. So he's got some great advice. So going with a bigger service now, if you're talking about a shorter podcast, they start at $5 a month. So you're talking about $5 a month because it's all about your storage. How much storage? I assume you're not going to have a video podcast. These videos I put up separately. So I put up the video on what's it called? That little YouTube thing. And then I'm starting to see a couple things on there. So I do that separately, and then the audio podcast I put out to them, and they put it out to 12 different services that because I have had to go in the beginning. You go in and you say, okay, I wanted to go here, and you have to plug in the file basically to all these different services. But once it's plugged in, every time you say publish, it publishes to all those services. And then there's a bunch of other services now that go from Libsyn, that grab from those services. So there's a bunch of littler podcast places that'll take it from Stitcher, that'll take it from Google Play Music, that'll take it from Apple. Oh no one gets it from Apple Podcasts. No one gets it from them. But the Apple Podcast still has 60% of the market. they started kind of the podcast idea. It's called a podcast. I learned this as a podcaster. Didn't know this before. It's called a podcast because Apple realized that people were doing these and decided they would put them on the iPod. And so, yeah, that was like 14 years ago or something. So that's how podcast came about. That's why it's called a podcast. It actually started, the place to get them was iPods. Now, of course, you can get it anywhere. And they're taking over. They're like the new audiobook. I mean, and it is really calming somehow if you find a good one to listen to. It can also be enraging if you find a really good one to listen to.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. But so, yeah, go with a service, look at the reviews, see what you think. Most of the time, well, I couldn't really see the actual, what's it called? The actual interface. I couldn't really see till I joined, but there's no contract. It's always month to month.
Month to month.
Yeah, it's month to month. If you decide, I think I really want to change over to this one, it's real simple. And you can like take your previous podcast and go to the next one. If I haven't been that frustrated yet, like I say, when I've had problems, they've had really good service.
Good support.
Good support. Yeah.
I guess it triggered another question then for me then. So you're obviously using Zoom. So I've looked into some different remote recording services as well. So I think Zencaster, I believe Squadcast. So is it possible, is it necessary as a new podcaster to also sort of get one of those subscription services, or is it, like we're using Zoom right now? Is that...
So that is a really good question. There's a couple. It's a loaded question. My short answer is no, absolutely not. There are two reasons. One, you want to record better audio than they're probably going to record, so you want to figure out some kind of recording on your computer. You can even do it on your phone. There's a free recording program called Audacity. It is a huge learning curve, but you really only have to learn three things. Like if you learn a little bit of EQ and a little bit of compression for a voice, that's really all you need. And how to plug. You already know how to plug a mic in because I can see you've got a mic plugged in. So you've already learned that. The other thing about remote recording services is guess who has that recording? Yeah. They do.
They have access to
they have it's theirs. You don't have the same freedom. And when you go to someone like Libsyn, I upload an MP3, but I still have that recording. That's still my recording, so I still have more control over it basically. And so if some disaster happened and Libsyn lost everything, I've still got them all. I still could re-upload them if I needed to, or whatever I need to do. So I always think
it's still your property. Then you still have the files.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You still have files, so you don't really want to give your files away. It's just not necessary. It's just not a necessary thing. What's tough is that no matter who you are, no matter what you do, there's going to be some tech involved. Someone who the larger. I was able to start the podcast because I had a lot of tech. Like I understand computers. I worked I was working as an IT person at a small office where I worked. I understand audio because I've been. I wanted to learn it to have better audio on home recordings and things like that. And I learned that the only way to get really good audio for free is to learn how to do it. As I've never had if I had a ton of money, I would just go to nice studios all the time. I would be sitting in a nice studio now. And if this gets big enough, I will probably hire some people to help. I'll hire some techs. So it's something to think about too. Do you want to hire someone at least to tech it for you in the beginning? Because once you have the basics down of your podcast, then you're pretty much done. You don't need to keep doing it. It's going to be the same no matter what you do. There's not going to be a lot. You're not going to change a lot as you go along. Maybe after 100 podcasts, you'll go, well, I need a different mic. Or if because you're not a tech person, that's not as likely. But if someone like me, I'm on my third mic, but that's only because I'm silly. And you don't, like this mic is, I bought this to replace another mic, and it's more related to recording drums than anything else. I bought a nice podcast mic because I thought I just want to, I want to have the best equipment possible. And so I spent a little money that I definitely don't need to spend. You can get a decent, unfortunately there's 10 of them, but you can get a decent USB mic that'll plug straight into your computer without a mixing board or anything. There's also now, speaking of tech, there are also boards. Now I forgot the name of it, but I keep being advertised this board. My buddy even sent it to me in a text. But it's a board that is specifically set up for podcasting.
Really?
So you can record straight to it, which means you can podcast anywhere. And it's about the board. It's little. It's probably this big. It's a very small unit. It has a couple of inputs, and it has inputs like for a phone. So you can record someone on the phone and your own self, just like it's already set up for it. So there are several things like that out there now, and those are about $500. I mean, the board by itself that I use was $1,200 when I bought it. So, the expense is going way, way down. And like I say, you can buy a decent USB mic, because I've talked to people on them through Zoom, and those are only around $100. And then that really ups your sound, because the better you sound, the better your podcast will be, no matter what, no matter what your guest sounds like coming in from wherever, phone or Zoom. I have the advantage of being able to go in and I do some audio fixes. So that's another thing that a lot of people hire someone to do. So, a lot of people who start a podcast, they hire a tech person, they hire a producer, and the producer then you don't have to worry about putting your podcast up and editing it. The producer does that basically. And then they hire like a promo person. So those are kind of the things you got to think about when you're doing it on your own. Think about the tech. Think about you're suddenly a producer, and you're going to have to promote it somehow. And the greatest thing that Rob Walsh said on my show, and I've heard him say it at least 4 other times on his own show, is podcasts still grow by word of mouth. So that's actually, for people like us, extremely encouraging. It's still the people sharing the podcast. So please share this podcast, whoever's listening. If you like the podcast, share it. Thank you. And then, so, it's creating email lists. It's being on social media. You have a fair amount of friends on social media, having your friends share it out there more. I mean, the biggest podcasts out there now were really aggressive about helping people get it out there, helping people share it, helping people making their people know about it. Being a best-selling author, of course, helps, but just to start with, it's not about, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's not about spending a ton of money on advertising and stuff. And there's nobody has found like the golden ticket to advertise a podcast, which I find very interesting. People are still fumbling. Another interesting fact, podcasts have gone up by 900,000 since I started. So just since I started, it was a fairly small niche. Just since I started, which is about a year ago now, 900,000 people have added their podcast to it's really incredible. And a lot of them, another thing that statistics show, Libsyn statistics, because they talk about their statistics on the feed, is that a lot of people never get past 10 shows. So if you can make 10, you're on your way. If you can get past your 10th episode. And something I would recommend that I started just as, hey, let's try this. Let's throw it up there. It was really silly. And I just started putting them up basically from the first episode. But I really would recommend anyone new at it, do 5. Do like 5 episodes. And then you have a nice start to put up. So you're going to give people, you give them, you put up one a week for 5 weeks. Now you got a big head start. So now you have a 5-week window to keep booking guests and keep going and keep doing stuff like that.
I've read about that too. Just that, sort of almost like the batching in a way. It's almost like it's the Netflix phenomena. If people start listening to you and they're like, I kind of like this. I'm going to tune into the next one. And it's like, I kind of like that second episode. I'm going to check out the third episode. It's like, if they have to wait, they're less likely. But like Netflix realizes, boom, they drop content, it's like there's the whole season, or it's just like giving people that opportunity to be, I guess, almost like binge. It's that binge behavior type of mentality that you can tap into, especially because I've even thought about maybe doing anywhere from 5 to 10 podcasts, batch producing them, maybe 5 or 6 where just me talking, so people kind of get to know me, and then lining up maybe 4 or 5 guests and getting them all done, and then dropping them and say, hey, I just dropped whatever 8 episodes or 10 episodes. I mean, I don't know if that would be a smart way to do it, but it seems like there would be some method to the madness of having sort of this, multiple episodes done ahead of time.
Yeah, I think that might be a really good idea. I mean, what I was talking about is having episodes that you can then you have some time to make the next episode. But throwing out 8 is also a really good way to do it. I mean, I think that would probably be just as effective because a friend of mine, hey, Jon, we were just talking yesterday about how when I look at my stats, I see that, my first episodes are getting hit almost as much as whenever I put out a new episode, my early episodes get more listens. So I do think there's that mentality that someone listens to a podcast. If they think it's okay, then they get that idea that, I've got to listen to them all. And on this podcast, there's definitely no reason to listen to them all, except it's an amazing story and you should hear it. But there's no reason to go back and hear every episode. But it's not episodic is what I'm trying to say. But that whole binge culture is definitely there, and people want to binge on whatever it is. So yeah, and they want to have more. That's why when you get past, if you want to get at least 10 out there for people, if you throw down 8 at a time, I think that will be. I would say that would definitely be an advantage. That would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's almost like the COVID culture kind of feeds that binge mentality, doesn't it? Because I mean, in a lot of ways, we've been a captive audience, and people are just looking for content. When you think about the last 4 or 5 months, so many people have been at home, and they're like, okay, I'm done with Tiger King, or I'm tired of watching the news and just getting this steady flow of the world is spinning, uncontrollably. I want to go listen to a podcast. I need something. I need some fuel in my life. I need some positivity, or I want to do some learning. Because that's one of the things that really draws me to this whole ecosystem. It's just hearing other people's stories, and just hearing learning. I mean, just the amount of learning and things that I think you can pick up by listening to people that have had these experiences, sort of all over the world, I think is really, really fascinating. And we can do it from the comfort of your living room, literally, or your studio. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's been a real mind blower for me, because I didn't. I mean, I thought I had no idea like how many different people I would be able to have on. It's really helped to have a podcast guest service. It's saved my podcast in a way. I mean, I took a month off just because I was overwhelmed when this all started. It was overwhelming to try and think of, well, how am I going to do this? Because telephone podcasts are okay, but I don't know, it's tough. I mean, I really like having people sitting here and talking to them. So once I did a Zoom podcast, I was able to just think, hey, this works too. This totally works. I can do this. And people are responding. I mean, I can't believe how many people responded to the little newsletter and asked to be on the podcast. That's totally blowing my mind. I haven't even caught up to that yet. I have some work to do, but it's really been mind-boggling. The weird thing about the crisis is that from what I've heard, the listenership of podcasts has gone down.
Really?
Well, because people aren't in their car, and at home, they're with all their kids. Suddenly they're at home with all their kids and dogs, and so it's hard to listen to a podcast. I mean, especially if they're listening to a Joe Rogan, because you might not want to listen to that with your kids. It might not be what you want to have on, or several podcasts of that ilk. But the amount of podcasts being produced, no surprise, has gone up because lots of people are at their home. Lots of people are they already had a business that they wanted to promote. And that's something that's new too. Podcasting is it's turned into this, somebody got the idea out there that a podcast is a great way to promote a business. And maybe it is, I'm not sure. I think that kind of wave will go down. I mean, and with what you're doing, it's different. It's not just, it's like, it's more part of your business. It's more part of it. It's you're trying to help people, which is a big part of the podcast industry is putting good information out there for people. But there's a big, you've got to have a podcast if you've got a business thing, which isn't necessarily, no, you don't.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, if podcasting isn't fun for you, I mean, if you do those first 8 and you think it's a huge chore, it's not going to work out for you. Like I get so psyched up, especially by the middle of a podcast.
Yeah.
I just love it. I mean, I love, sitting down with different people all the time and figuring out where it's going to go. It's really exciting to me. And have I ever not liked the result? I think I've always liked the result so far.
Yeah. So I relate to that. I mean, I feel like I'm a kid in a candy store right now, just listening to you talk. Like it's like, oh my gosh, I just want to, I want to hear more of this, because it's just, I really love the, just the opportunity of sharing. And I think that for me, podcasting, even though it will go hand in hand with my business, I think even if I didn't have the business, podcasting is something I would really want to do, because it fits with I love to talk. I'm curious. I'm always the guy that when we're out, and I'm tailing behind the rest of my family, and they're like, "Who are you talking to now?" And I'm like, "Oh, just talking to this guy that, we started talking about this." And they're like, "How do you know him?" I'm like, "No, but I do now."
Yeah.
He's a Facebook friend now. So it's just sort of this curiosity about people and their stories. And this is only like my fourth podcast that I've been on. I have to say, when I know I'm going to do one of these, like I woke up today and I'm like, I can't wait to meet you and just to be on the podcast, because I'm like, this is just my element. I love this, this whole experience. So yeah, it got me to thinking, is I'm just going to have to take the leap and kind of get through the tech. And it's a lot like writing. I've heard writers say, what do you like more? Do you like having written, or do you like writing? Because all writers like having written. Once the book's out there and it's done, and they're but I like the process of writing too, and I think it's going to be that way with podcasting. I don't want to be the person who always wants to have a podcast. I want to be the person who's doing the podcast, and that's going to take. It's just like anything else. What they say, there's a devil at every level, right? And it's the initial level is, for me, is going to be getting through some of the initial tech and the equipment and probably the editing and some of the things that you were talking about. But I feel like once I get over some of those initial hurdles, then it sounds like once you've done the initial, that it's not like you're having to reinvent the wheel each time. Then it's just a matter of kind of rinse and repeat. Once you sort of understand sort of the basic steps of the editing and the tech and that kind of thing. So yeah, so I know that's kind of imminent for me, and I'm a little bit scared about it. A little bit like, oh gosh, just jumping into a lot of stuff I don't know a whole lot about. But that's why there's people to ask questions. Even what you've shared with me has been so helpful. I mean, I'm sitting here taking this in because picked up some pointers today.
Well, also, you have, is it 4 children?
I have 3.
You have 3 kids. Okay,
yeah.
So there you go. There's your tech right there. You got.
I thought about asking my son, because he's pretty sharp. And
there you go.
Okay, maybe this be a little part-time job. Say, hey,
Yeah.
you want to be my podcast
Well,
production manager, my editor slash, jack of all trades podcast guy before you go to England, and then maybe Dad will learn it by the time you go to England, back, over to school in England, and I can sort of, figure out my own stuff by then. But yeah.
Young brains, though, they're such a good resource because in most cases they're way ahead on tech than we are. It's like
Yeah.
I do help my niece, but that's an unusual circumstance. Most kids are way ahead of their parents on tech,
You're right.
so it's not a bad
Right.
not
They
a
speak
bad
the
resource.
language. You're so right about that. It's their language. I mean, I'm always going to my 13-year-old saying, "Hey, how do you do this? My phone's stuck in this mode. How do I get out of this? How do I do this? How do I download the?" And I remember I was on a flight a couple years ago, Southwest Airlines, and they were telling everybody, to kind of put their tech stuff away and put your phone on airplane mode and stuff and that kind of stuff. And they said, if you're not really sure how to do that, they said, find the closest 10-year-old that you're sitting near, and
Yes,
they'll help you with that. And I'm like, that is so true. It's so
it
true.
is. Yeah, they're, they've already seen it enough times. They know.
That's right.
Yeah, the 10-year-olds will know how to do it.
That's right. They'll figure it out. Let the pilot fly the plane, and the 10-year-olds will get the tech turned off, and everybody on airplane mode.
Everybody, that's so funny. Oh my God. Yeah, but the tech stuff is a pain in the butt, but it definitely is once you got it down. I still do tech because I am an audio engineer, so I will hear things in almost every recording that I want to tweak, but it's not necessary. I mean, I see a lot of big shows that are probably not doing that. They're just recording the audio and they edit it up a little bit, but mostly to put ads in. And that's another thing you want to decide is it going to be more produced or is it going to be more kind of live? And if it's more of a live feel, there's very little editing. I mean, I forgot to tell you at the beginning, but I usually tell my guests, if you want me to edit something, if you say something you don't want your 13-year-old to hear, I can edit that out.
Right.
But other than that, I like to keep it live. And I think the people listening so far, no one said otherwise. I think they like, the live feel. There's been some major, I've made mistakes where I've had to edit or I've had people drop out, like literally drop off the call. And so I've edited things like that. Fell off a chair or something. There's been a couple little accidents, but mostly it's fine just to go and, this kind of conversation we're having is probably really entertaining. It's entertaining for us. So it's probably entertaining for other people. That's the other thing that's interesting,
Yeah. And it's exciting too, because, you're thinking there's an audience of people out there. And I always thought, if you can pick up one nugget, when I used to go to the coaching clinics, for the football clinics, I thought in this 2 or 3 days, if I can learn one thing a day that I can take back with me, and it usually felt like a pretty big success, So when you listen to something like this, maybe somebody picks up a pointer on tech, or they pick up, something else. And so I think it's exciting to think of all the different things that people can take away from a live conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I try not to think about it too much. As far as I know, it's just me and you.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if I always think, oh man, wouldn't it be great to have a ton of listeners and so I could get a sponsor and da 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 da. And then I think, but then I would have a ton of listeners, and they'd probably want something. They would have something to say about
Careful
the show.
what you wish for,
I
I
don't
guess.
know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Careful what you wish for. Yeah. Oh, geez. So let me see. I did want to ask, I'll make this a 2-part question.
Yeah.
What was like the maybe biggest thing you learned visiting all 50 states?
That's a great question. I think really just that each area really has regional differences, I mean, local color, if you will. But I think but there's a commonality though, amongst, you know, and I would even say this visiting the different countries too, but I think that, that people are in a lot of ways the same. And a lot of
Hmm.
times I think we just hear about the differences that people are having, especially in the media right now. And we're all divided. We're all, and of course there's polarization, but I think what I really learned to appreciate is that no matter where I went, people are they're after a lot of the same things. You know, um, something to do, you know, that's meaningful, somebody to love, something to look forward to, and so when I had conversations with people around the country, it's like, wow, there's a lot of commonalities, a lot of similarities here, that I see. And I think the other thing is just the sheer beauty of the United States. I think seeing different places on postcards is one thing, and then getting out and hiking maybe in, Big Sur, or you know, um, getting into the Rocky Mountains, and or the jagged coastline of Maine, or the plains of the Midwest. I mean, there's just so much diversity and so much beauty in America, and I think that's the other thing that really just shines through. That it's a big country, it's a diverse country, and it's a very, very beautiful country. And yeah,
Yeah, that really is amazing. I mean, I live in a pretty large state and I live next to several large states. And even in those states, there is so much amazing places to see. I mean, Oregon has a massive desert. People forget that.
yeah,
Half of it is kind of like a rainforest, but the other half, no, two thirds of Oregon is basically a desert. And I love the desert as well. And it's the same with California. California is got this massive desert because people think of LA and they think of palm trees, but those were all planted. That was actually a desert. And it must look amazing now since they've somehow got rid of all this pollution. Just poof.
yeah,
And,
yeah. Amazing.
the whole state, then you go up to the northern part of California and it's a Big Sur area, elephant seals. Have you been to that beach where the elephant seals are?
I've I don't yeah, I'm trying to remember where I was at up that way. Um, I was I'm trying to think, it's by the Bixby Bridge. I think it was that Highway 1 that way,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure I know that the elephant sills, yeah.
It's right by Hearst Castle, and now I'm forgetting the actual city that it's
Okay.
close to. But we
Yeah,
were
so
gonna,
you go north of San Luis Obispo, and
yeah,
it's San Simeon, I think,
yeah,
Hearst
San
Castle. I know what
Simeon.
you're talking about.
That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
My now wife and I, girlfriend at the time, we were gonna go to Hearst Castle, and so right below Hearst Castle, we pulled over on this beach. We're like, look, oh, there's a beach. Let's go there first. And it's the elephant seals mating area. We had no idea. So there's all these giant seals. Yeah, just an example of so much to explore in the U.S. So
wow.
much to see. Yeah, it was mind-boggling. A male elephant seal is really huge and really ugly, and just something to see. Really,
I'm having this image,
really
yeah.
something to see.
Probably to see that live is probably a whole other experience.
And that's kind of like you were saying, when you see these areas for yourself or actually see them and it's not on television, it's just mind-boggling. I still am and I still am blown over when I hear people say, "Oh, I went to the Grand Canyon. There was a hole in the ground." I mean, I've heard that from more than one person, and I'm just like, I don't understand how you could think that. Because I went there and was, when I lived in LA, it was an 8-hour trip. So we could go for an overnighter and
Yeah,
go camping and go see the canyon, and just, blows me away. And there's places like that all over the place, all over the US.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorite areas is down like southern Utah, which is not, a couple hour drive from the north rim of the canyon. 'Cause a lot of people go to the south rim of the canyon, which is beautiful, but I like sometimes going to the north rim of the canyon, and that whole area, just the deserts and the red rock, and there's a stretch down in there where you've got, like Zion National Park, and Lake Powell and the north rim of the Grand Canyon, and it's just absolutely stunning.
Yeah, my sister. I have a sister that's been to that area twice now, and that's definitely on my bucket list because I've always been to the South Rim, which is it seems like the more touristy area,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
also
it is.
you can take a little walk and go halfway down the canyon,
Yep.
which is pretty crazy. And at the time, it wasn't that crowded. We also, when we first went, there weren't fences. I think they put fences now, but
Okay.
you can walk to the edge, and we walked to the edge on a full moon. And when you stand on the edge and look out, it's like you're standing in space. I mean, it's like you're standing 9,000 feet above the river.
Oh, I
And
bet that's something else.
it knocked me over. I mean, I literally had to back up and go on my knees because it was like, whoa, hold on. And then I crawled back over there because you can't see where you're standing on. You can just see the canyon. It's really mind blowing.
Yeah,
Now,
it's a
now you
amazing
can do it
place.
on an invisible glass, not glass, but now they have that. I forgot what it's called. It's like a big balcony.
Yeah, it's like
Have you
that
seen it?
walkway.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
you
a
can walk
walkway. You
out
can walk
over. Yeah,
out over. I don't know if I could do it.
I'm not sure about that.
That
Yeah,
looks scary.
I hope there's some good engineers to put that together. I don't
Yeah,
know. Somebody
yeah.
had an off day, and
I don't know.
yeah, I'm not sure I could
Exactly.
do that, but
It makes me
I haven't
nervous.
checked that out yet.
But there are so many places like that to see. Yeah, I look forward to it one day when I can go back to traveling. I know we can travel to all these areas now. The problem is using public restrooms and stuff on the way.
Oh, I know.
It's like
I know.
I feel like going to a park is probably just fine. It's just that getting there
Yeah,
may
there's
not
probably a
be.
lot more people using parks now in that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the parks are really full right now. That's what I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
we drove through Yellowstone about 6-7 weeks ago, and the park was still closed. We just kind of drove through the part of the park where nobody really goes to, and not the place where you don't have to pay. And but the main kind of touristy part of the parks were still closed when we went through. But yeah, it was quiet, just hardly any activity, and it was just really weird being because I used to live near Yellowstone, literally
Hmm.
about 10 minutes from Yellowstone. And it was this time of year, people were packing it in there. So it's just really odd to see the place in May with virtually empty.
Oh, that must be strange. Yeah, I've seen a lot of pictures too of the animals around the lodges and
Yeah.
just kind of taking it back over where
I
people.
know there's been a lot of
Yeah.
encounters lately, I've noticed. I wonder if like the animals are, like they're wondering where all the people were for a while, and then all of a sudden the people are now starting to show up in Yellowstone in droves. And it's like, I'll be on social media and I'll be looking, I'll be like, I think yesterday a 72-year-old woman was gored by a bison in the park, and then there's been some bear encounters. It's like this all of a sudden it seems like there's a lot more animal encounters going on in the park.
They probably are not used to the people anymore. It
Probably
only
not.
takes them
Yeah.
a few months to go, hey,
Yeah.
this is our park again.
Yeah.
What are you all doing here?
Yeah, what are you doing here?
Yeah, man. We went a couple years ago to Yellowstone, and seeing a buffalo right in front of your cars, that is really an experience. That is a big animal. You probably see him a
It's
lot.
large animal.
Yeah, that is a big animal. Where did you live near the?
I lived in a town called Big Sky for a
Okay,
while. Yeah,
that's
so
Montana, right?
it's a ski resort town in Montana.
Uh-huh.
It's about 45 minutes from West Yellowstone, and but it's only about a 20-minute drive to the border of the park. And so we used to go hiking and rafting in the park quite a lot. And then a couple years later, we moved over to West Yellowstone. So my wife and I lived there before we had kids, but I coached junior high football in the town of West Yellowstone for a while. We used to have to travel through the park sometimes to play our away games and to these other little towns located near the parks. I remember stories of having to chase elk off the football field so we could play a game because these little towns like Gardner and
Uh-huh.
Twin Bridges and some of these little communities in Montana, because lots of wildlife. But yeah, I was in West Yellowstone. I could almost throw a stone into the park from where I lived. It was very close. So 20-minute drive to Old Faithful.
Oh yeah, it's right
So
there. We had a family reunion in Cody, So
Okay, yeah.
we went in from the other side,
From
and
like the eastern side, yeah.
from the eastern
Wyoming.
side.
Yep.
So there
Yeah.
was way less. It was nice because there was no crowd going in, and we didn't even bother going all the way around to Old Faithful because there's just so much to see. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's mind-boggling. Our first encounter, I can't remember where I read it. A guidebook or something said if you see a crowd of people, pull over. It means
Yeah.
there's something going
There's
on.
something to see.
Something
Yeah.
to see. So crowd of people. We go past. There was really hard to find a spot, so we had to pass all the cars, and we pull over. And my wife's going, what's? I don't get it. What are we looking at? And I said, well, maybe it's those two grizzly bears right up there. And so, first thing I saw, which I think is pretty rare, was a grizzly bear and two cubs, and not very
fortunate to
far
see
away.
that,
Yeah, I mean, the minute
Yeah.
we get out of our car, there was a ranger going, "Okay, come here, come here, come here, come here." So yeah, it was
Very
amazing.
cool. Yeah, I mean, it's a massive park. I mean, it's just, I think, over 2.2 million acres. And
Mhm.
I remember reading, I think they can fit, like, if you were to take, I think it's like Delaware, I believe, and like Connecticut, Rhode Island, so you could fit them in the park and still have a bit of room left over. So it's amazing when you think about just how big of an area it encompasses.
Interesting side note on that. Someone I grew up with, a very good friend of my brother's and still a very good friend of mine, co-wrote the Atlas of Yellowstone.
Oh,
So if you ever have a chance to get the Atlas of Yellowstone, it's a big book. It's the first atlas of a national park that ever been done, which still shocks me. And it has it's just full of information about the park. I mean, geological, animals, history of the park, anything you could think of, maps, old maps, new maps, all about Yellowstone. So you should check that out. They do have it at Yellowstone now at the gift shops. He works. He's a cartographer for the University of Oregon. So it was a joint project between the University of Oregon and University of Montana and Yellowstone, and it's pretty amazing, pretty incredible.
yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. Yeah, very fascinating.
Now they've done a follow-up that's about the ungulates of the Yellowstone. I think it's called the Yellowstone Basin. But they're finding out all kinds of things about those animals, hooved animals, and how far they travel every year, and what kind of things they do, and that's pretty fascinating too.
Wow.
They've
Yeah.
done a couple of maps that show, because they collared one of the I can't remember what it was. Can't remember which ungulate it was, but they had never seen how far these things actually travel. I think it might have been a pronghorn, but I'm forgetting if it was that or an elk. And they saw that it went like almost 2,000 miles from winter to summer. So
Amazing, huh?
yeah, it was really something, really incredible.
Wow. Yeah, it's an amazing place. There's just so much to see there.
So we should probably wrap this up soon. It's been amazing talking to you. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
It's been an honor to be on. I tell you, I've enjoyed it, and really enjoyed the conversation. Very stimulating conversation, and so appreciate you having me on.
You bet. And if you get your podcast going, when you get your podcast going, I would love to be on, and love to have you back after you've been doing it for a while. And
yeah, I'd love to come back, give you some updates, and have you on as a guest as well. So let's do it. Let's definitely do that.
That would be awesome. All right. So you have been listening to Were You Still Talking? This is Joel Albrecht, and my guest today has been Eric, oh damn it, Slivoskey. Eric Slivoskey. Thanks so much for coming on. Everyone, please share the podcast. Please leave a comment on iTunes or whatever. I don't know. I'm supposed to put all kinds of extra promotion here, but whatever. I'm just doing it for fun. So, like I always say, be good to each other.